Michigan coming from, well, I thought a space of dominance to beat up on a Maryland team that was just 6-4, but it did not go as fluidly as you would like to see it go. Now, I'm not going to be the person that tells you that somehow Michigan fell into a trap game or Jim Harbaugh not being on the sideline was a bigger deal than it is. I am going to say that in November, particularly as Michigan gets closer and closer to the game, they become this kind of football team where they want to put the onus on the offensive line and on the defense to get stops. And let's be clear, Jesse Minter's defense was playing outstanding football against Maryland. I mean, at halftime, they had held Maryland to negative rush yards, but you can do that when Taulia Tagovailoa is running around for his life. Also, you're getting strip sack fumbles, scoring TDs. You're getting 2 safeties in this game. But I think for most folks, you're looking at this as a Michigan game going, okay, is this team good enough to beat Ohio State? Yeah, probably. Are they good enough to win a national championship? We'll have to wait and see. And because you have these mishaps for this Michigan football team against a program that is not great, but is bowl eligible in Maryland, you have room to question them. Now, there's a lot that went into the lead up to this week's game against Maryland too. Now, first, let's start with the Michigan decided that it was going to respect the Big Ten suspension of Jim Harbaugh, right? He's going to sit out not just the last 2 games, but the game against Ohio State. Nobody wants that, including Ohio State fans who would love for that man to be on the sideline because right now he's 2-0 in the last 2 years, and they would like to be able to really ruin what is becoming a dream season for Michigan, where they have a head coach that could have coached just 6 games during the regular season and could absolutely win the national championship. And as I talked about earlier this week, this 2023 Michigan team is a better scoring offense and a better scoring defense than the 1997 national championship team. And with the win against Maryland 31-24, Michigan became the first FBS program to win 1,000 games. That's also pretty outstanding because they have a 10-year head start on Rutgers. The first Michigan football game was played against Racine May 30th, 1879. They won that game. Yes, I am that kind of college football nerd, and this is what I do. I love this stuff. But also, you got to see Blake Corum really coming into his own, especially with a national broadcast, the spotlight, what that dude has been doing for most of his career. He had 28 carries for 94 yards, 2 TDs. That gave him 51 career rush TDs, which also puts him number 1 on the all-time rush TD chart. With 51, he's 2 ahead of Anthony Thomas. He's 9 ahead of Denard Robinson. He is ahead of his running backs coach, Mike Hart, who's got 41. And then Tyrone Wheatley, who was great when I was a kid, had 40. I think you're also talking about a Michigan team that really does like to put on the black hat, even if these wounds are self-imposed. Like, we got to see Roman Wilson come out in a free Harbaugh shirt, and I'm like, all right, cool. Y'all did this to yourselves, but I understand. Whatever gets you going to beat Maryland, who hasn't beaten a top 10 opponent since 2007 and hasn't beaten a top 10 Big Ten opponent ever as a Big Ten member, right? They're 0-34 now, but this game was, again, it was tight, right? If Taulia Tagovailoa plays a little bit better, perhaps Maryland can pull this thing out. But I thought that last year when Maryland lost this game 34-27 at the Big House. But also, how were they going to not just deal with Jim Harbaugh not being on the sideline once again, with Sharon Moore being acting head coach, calling plays for the offense, Jesse Minter, really relying on his dad, Rick Minter, to run the linebacking group, because on Friday, Michigan relieved Chris Partridge of his duties, basically in connection with, you were talking about this investigation as it was going on, which also shows that Michigan is really taking this investigation as seriously as we would like them to as neutrals on this thing. But I also thought that they mostly came out of this game unscathed going into it, because Roman Wilson took a really tough shot to the head by Dante Trader. I thought it was targeting. By the letter of the law, I thought it was targeting, but the officials saw it the other way. I'm fine with it, because I agreed with Joel on the broadcast, which is to say, is it an illegal hit? Yes. Do I want to see him kicked out of the game for that hit? Absolutely not. If that's what it had to be, that's what it had to be. Now, you also gave Michigan an opportunity to just pull Roman Wilson out of there, make sure nothing else happens to the goods before they got to play the game in Ann Arbor. You also given other guys an opportunity to really distinguish themselves. Like, we haven't seen a whole lot of Cornelius Johnson. I think he came into this game with like 26 receptions, getting to see more Colston Loveland, getting to see more Tyler Moore. But also, I wanted to see more JJ McCarthy. And I got to tell you guys, I don't think they trust that dude to go win them the football games like I thought they did before the start of November. Number one, he didn't really throw the ball against Penn State, because I don't think they wanted to throw the ball against Penn State, because He threw the ball against Maryland, and guys, it was not great. 12 of 23 for 141 with an INT. And that INT, most people will tell you it's just really, really bad, and it was a game-changing play that could have put Michigan up by even more. Kudos to Maryland and the defense for coming up with it, but we're talking about Michigan not beating Ohio State, although we are. We're talking about Michigan winning a college football playoff game because we know they can beat Ohio State. We know they can win a Big Ten championship game. We don't know that they can win a college football playoff game because they haven't. And I think whenever it's in JJ McCarthy's hands in these big game moments, he hasn't really stepped into the vogue in the way that we want to. Usually when he's beating up on people, the offensive run game is doing really, really well. In this one, again, I expected Blake Corum to go for 100 plus, and I expected them to rush for 200, but I think they only had about 151 yards on the ground. And you really had to lean on the defense to do a lot of work that I'm used to the offense being able to do for Michigan, which also throws into your plans for Michigan kind of a wrench, right? If you can't stay on schedule, and if you guys get off rhythm and you fall behind by 2 scores, can you beat other teams? That's going to be a question that I come back to as we continue to talk about today. But Blake Corum, again, 11 straight games with a rush TD, basically going back to the one where he suffered the knee injury against Ohio State. And that's the last time that he really hasn't scored a TD, because inside the 5-yard line, you give that dude the ball behind that offensive line and they're going to go do what they do. Michigan also blocked a punt that ended up getting booted out of the back of the end zone. They were 16-3 and I thought the route was on, right? The problem that you have if you are a Michigan fan is the route should have been on. It should have always been on, because you're coming up against an Ohio State team that absolutely has found its way right before they gotta play you. If you like what you've seen, consider subscribing to the #1 college football show on YouTube, the Fox Sports app, or wherever you get your podcast.